Makadi mhuri yeZimbabwe, kutanga ndinoda kutenda nekunge muchiona channel ino Immigration Insights. Zita ndinonzi Patson Chapeyama. Kune vamwe wagara vari watsigiriwe channel ino, ndonofunga kuti nhasi mashamisika kuti ndikutaura nerurimi rwedu rweShona. Ndaona kuti topic yanhasi itopic yakanaka and itopic yatingada kuti tikurukure sema Zimbabweans. But ndisati ndabata topic yanhasi, ndinoda ngotanga nekutenda takasvitsa 500 subscribers pa channel ino, and tiri kutarisa kuti before the year end risati rayapera tinenge tasvika ku 1000 subscribers. So target yandinayo izvezvi ndeye kuti tisvike 1000 subscribers. So kana kari kekutanga kunge uchisangana nechannel ino, ndinokumbira kuti mubaye subscribe button, tinoda kuti mulike video rino, mushare, leave your comments. Ndinoda kunzwa kubva kwamuri zvamunoda kuti tirambe tichiwedzera matopics amunoda kuti tirambe tichiadressa pa channel ino. Makasununguka kutibata muchitizivisa kuti ndezvipi zvamunoda kuti tirambe tichiimprove. Kune vamwe wagari vanoramba vachiona mavideos angu but wasati wasubscribe to this channel, ndinokumbirisa zvakanyanya kuti mutitsigirewo nekusubscribe to this channel. So nhasi tine topic yakanaka yatinoda kuti tidiscusse. Issue iyi yanga iri topical mumasaisai social medias. It has been topical pama discussions akawanda social media, even kuma foreign land. There are Zimbabweans wari kugara in the diaspora, and there is a topical issue yokuti vanhu vari kuencourage ana kuti ngatite relocate back to Zimbabwe. You are a Zimbabwean, muri kugara in the diaspora, and you are considering to relocate back to Zimbabwe. So nhasi ndoda kutaura mafungiro angu maererano nepfungwa iyi. Ipfungwa yakanaka chaizvo, but usati waita decision yekuita relocate back to Zimbabwe, ndine zvinhu zvandoda kumboti timbokurukura tese muzuva ranhasi, so that before you make that key decision yekudzoka kuZimbabwe munge uchiconsider those factors. So video rino ndicharidambura muzvikamu zvitatu. Chikamu chekutanga ndichabata ndine 4 classes of people dzandinotarisira kuti kana uri muclass ye4 classes idzodzo unokwanisa kutanga kufunga nepfungwa iyi yekudzoka kumba kuZimbabwe. Then ndine pa second part, pa chikamu chepiri tichabata a class of people. Ndine one class of people yevanhu vandinotarisira kuti vari kudiaspora. It might not be the right time yekuti munge muchi make a decision yekuti muruda kudzoka kumba kuZimbabwe. Then the third chikamu chechitatu chandichabata muzuva ranhasi ndeche other key factors. Ndozve zvimwe zvinhu zvaungakwanise kuconsider before waita decision yekuita relocate back to Zimbabwe. I have a disclaimer pa this video. The disclaimer that I have is aya mafungiro angu, maonero angu. So don't take it as a professional advice, but take it as mafungiro angu inini, as a piece of advice. So you can consider it, but it's not a professional advice. Another disclaimer also that I have is I'm not discouraging anyone kuti ange achita that decision yekudzoka kumba. If anything, I would love you to come back to Zimbabwe if you are a Zimbabwean living in the diaspora, because there are some positive indications mu economy nezviri kuitika muZimbabwe zviri kuratidza kuti we are moving in the right direction. So if there is anything, I would love you to be back home, and I would love you to be enjoying your home country and they always vanhu vese zvinowanzotaurwa nevanhu vakawanda kuti home is always the best. So takuda kupinda munyaya yedu, so stay tuned. So this is the first part yepresentation inoi. So I will touch on 4 classes of people wandinotarisira kuti wange wachifunga about relocating back to Zimbabwe. So the first class of people wandofungidzira kuti wanofanira kunge vari kutarisira kana kuti wange vari kufunga kudzoka kuZimbabwe iclass yevanhu vari kugara kudiaspora vasina ma-academic qualifications, vasina ma-skills avainawo, vasina vari kurarama muma-uncomfortable situations, vasina mabasa. So this is the first class of people. Hauna ma-academic qualifications, hauna any skill yawinayo, and uri kugara in uncomfortable circumstances. So kana uri muklasi tomboti uri kugara, kana uri South Africa uri kugara kumukuku, you are struggling to make ends meet, hauna any proper legal status yawinayo, hauna proper documentation dzinokubvumidza kunge uchigara munyika iyoyo, and uri kurarama in unpleasant circumstances, and maybe you are living in unsafe neighborhoods, you are struggling, wakaenda uchida unotsvaga ma-opportunities, ma-greener pastures, but at this point pane zvinhu zvandataura izvi, you are not able to meet those key requirements, and there are no prospects yekuti unokwanisa kuwana ma-opportunities. I encourage you, kana uri this category, you can start to think and plan or to relocate back to Zimbabwe, because kana uri muclass E, I think it's just the same circumstances dzine vamwe vari kurarama vari muZimbabwe, and it's actually good kuti unge uchinetseka kana kuti unge uri ma-circumstances iwayo uri kunyika kwako. That is the first class of people that I think should start to think about relocating back to Zimbabwe. So class H2 yandiri ku encourage kuti kana uri kugara ku diaspora, you must be thinking of relocating back to Zimbabwe. You are above 60 years of age. You are in the retirement age. You have been living in the diaspora for a lot of years. Waishanda uchigara kudiaspora, makakwanisa kumanage kutenga ma-properties kudiaspora, vamwe venyu makatovaka makatoita investment back home kuZimbabwe, makadzidzisa vana venyu wese vakapedza zvikoro, you are just staying in the diaspora. Kana uri muklasi, you can now decide to think to relocate back to Zimbabwe. Nekuti kana ungoone musha wako nawo kuZimbabwe, you can just relocate and retire zvakanaka uri kuZimbabwe ikoko. Kana ungoone ma-properties ari kunze, cost of living in Zimbabwe, it's actually low. So kana ungoone ma-properties aungoe nawo kuri kudiaspora ikoko, unogona kutanga kuwana rental income inokwanisa kuzokubatsira kunge uchirarama uri kuZimbabwe. So if you are above 60 years of age, you can start to think about relocating back to Zimbabwe. And kana uri above 60 years, you have been staying also mu diaspora, and zvinhu zviri tough izvezvi, zvinhu zvinawo hazvisi kukufambira zvakanaka, wangochigara kudiaspora uri kumbotry kubatanidza but mari hadzisi kubatika. I think also at that age you can also think about relocating back to Zimbabwe. So this is class number 2. And class number 3, you are a self-employed person. You are running a business in the diaspora. You may end your business or the venture that you are doing, unokwanisa kuireplicate back to Zimbabwe. I think you can decide also to relocate back to Zimbabwe. Maybe you are an artisan, or maybe you are someone are self-employed, ari kuita mabasa emaoko. You are a mechanic, you are a painter, or a builder, maybe uri kurana a small businesses, maybe you are running a tuck shop, a grocery shop, a clothing shop, a spaza shop kana uri South Africa, maybe uri kutengesa matai, une zvimwe zvinhu zvauri kutengesa, uri kutengesa motor spares, motor accessories. Maybe you are in a certain line of business rauri kuita raunofungidzira kuti if you replicate that same business model ku Zimbabwe, it can be successful. If you are in this third category, you can decide to relocate back to Zimbabwe. Before you make that decision yekuti wakuda kudzoka ku Zimbabwe, my advice ndeyekuti do a trial project. Unogona kuti usati wamake the final move, unogona kumboya ku Zimbabwe wombo open another branch yezvauri kuita. You can monitor it for a month or a second month, uchiona kuti how is it performing, uchijairira the environment yeku Zimbabwe, and then kana waona kuti zviri kufamba zviri kuita, you can then make a final move. You can still, kana uchikwanisa kurana your businesses kuti uchirana uri ku Zimbabwe uri ku South Africa, I can also still encourage you kuti murambe muchizvirana zviri tu, or you are in the diaspora any other country, you can still run your business in both countries, mu Zimbabwe neku diaspora country kwaungori. Unokwanisa kuita sei kurana that business, businesses wayo zvakadaro. Usakurumidze kuclose reku South Africa usati wanatsoona kuti reku Zimbabwe for example harisati rakunatsoperforma zvakanaka. Usakurumidze kuclose reku UK or any country that you are operating in. So ndo zvimwe zvinhu zvandiri kukurudzirai before musati maita that final decision or that final step yekuya ku Zimbabwe. So if you are in this class of people, because kuno ku Zimbabwe kune vamwe vanhu vakadaro vari kuena also more money in that line, vari self-employed, they can also make a living mu Zimbabwe. So if you are tired of staying in the diaspora, you are self-employed, you have a skill set yawinayo in yaunokwanisa kumonetizer, and maybe you are running a business, you can start to think about relocating back to Zimbabwe. Then the fourth class of people, vandinofungidzira kuti you can also decide to relocate back to Zimbabwe. If you are someone who is working in the diaspora but you are working remotely and your job inokubvumidza kushanda from any part of the world and you are earning maybe a minimum salary, and hausati waita anything kumusha, hausati wadevelopa anything kumusha, I can encourage you to also relocate back to Zimbabwe. Ku Zimbabwe zvakakanakira, the cost of living is slightly below most of the countries ari kurarama nemaZimbabweans in the diaspora. So if you can work remotely, I feel you can consider coming back to Zimbabwe. But if you are earning a very nice job and you know kuti in your profession kunge uri ku diaspora ikoko kunovhura mamwe mikana yakawanda within your profession or within your industry, kunokuita kuti uwane access to more opportunities, you may not decide to come back to Zimbabwe. Now, this is the part 2 of my presentation where I'm going to look at the classes of people. At this point, it might not be the right time to decide to come back to Zimbabwe. So if you are someone who has a decent employment, you have academic qualifications and skill sets that you have, and you have a legal status to stay in that country, I don't think you can just make a decision to come back to Zimbabwe right now. I think it might not be the right time for you. Kana uine a decent job that is giving you a decent income, at this point might not be the right time to come back to Zimbabwe, because the risk that you have is that munogona kuya ku Zimbabwe and you might not find a similar opportunity in Zimbabwe. So kana uri munhu ane a decent employment, working at you are earning a decent salary, and also you have your skill sets and your qualifications, I encourage you kuti utange kufunga nezve relocation now, but might not be the right time to come. You may start to plan about relocation. So you can start to do your savings, muchi investor big kumba, and then when the right time comes, when you have made some enough investments, maybe you have your property back home, you have a running project that is giving you additional income or that is giving you passive income, then at that point you can decide kuti udzoke kumba. But kana zvinhu zvako zvichiri kuflowa, you have a decent employment, mune mapapers ekugara zviri legal, you are living in a decent neighborhood, and you are living a decent lifestyle, I don't think it's the right time to come back. Plan your relocation gradually, and eventually mozaita that decision when the right time comes. Don't just leave your employment, don't just leave it, don't just make an abrupt decision right now, because life gonna be difficult when you come back to Zimbabwe. And then this is the third and the final part of this presentation, where I'm going to touch on the key considerations. Ndeapi ma key considerations mamwe amungakwanise kuconsider before making that final move to relocate back to Zimbabwe. Number one, do not talk about schools. There are socialites vari kuencourage people kuti ngatidzoke back, tino relocate back kumusha, tonovaka mansions back kumusha, but ndoda kuti muconsider this factor as you are also making that move, like access to schools. You are still a young couple, you still have young kids varuda kuenda kuchikoro. In the diaspora, maybe vana vangu vari kudzidza muzvikoro zvakanaka, you have good access to good schools, and vana vangu vachikwanisa kuenda vachidzidza maybe for free, and vachiwana decent resources are in place. So before you make that move of relocating back to Zimbabwe, consider kuti kana uri kunovaka imba kumusha, or kana uri kunotenga imba kuZimbabwe uruda kuzodzoka kuZimbabwe uine vana, vachange vaine access kumaschools akanaka here, and maschools achange ari close here nepauchange uchivakira, and also vachawana mafacilities avanga vachivana here vari kudiaspora pavachazouya kuZimbabwe kunoko. So it's one of the key considerations that you have to think about. Then the second key consideration, and often that you can consider, it's healthcare. Maybe you are in the diaspora, you access to medical facilities, you have access to good medcare. Vana venyu wane good access to medcare, you are getting medcare at affordable prices, and before you make that decision to come back to Zimbabwe, pauri kuzogara kuZimbabwe, you need to make that decision. In Zimbabwe, medicare is a bit expensive. If you want to get proper medicare from private institutions, like private hospitals or private medical centers, and also the public medical health care in Zimbabwe is a bit depressed, and there are shortages of medicines in local medical facilities, public medical facilities. So maybe urikoko ku diaspora, you have access to good medicare. You may also decide kuti kwauri kuzono relocate wauya kuZimbabwe, are you going to have access to good medicare? So this is another key consideration. And kana uchiwaka imba kumusha, how far is it from a close medical facility? Because maybe uchazorwara, vana vachazobatwa nemusoro, vacharwara, vanoda kuzowana proper medical attention. So this is one of the key consideration that you also have to make before you make that move to relocate back to Zimbabwe. And then another factor is the cost of living. Cost of living tikutarisa zvinhu zvakawanda. Tikutarisa kuti how much are you paying in terms of rentals, how much are you paying in terms of schools, fees, groceries and stuff. So also consider your cost of living. In some certain countries in the diaspora, maybe the cost of living and the quality of life is far much better when you are living in some of the parts in Zimbabwe. So you need also to consider that. Yes, most people will say the cost of living in Zimbabwe is relatively lower as compared to other countries in the diaspora. Yes, that's true, but it might not be true for it. It depends in different circumstances. There are some other people who are staying in leaf suburbs in South Africa, but they are paying, if you are comparing those neighborhoods in Zimbabwe, they're actually paying less in terms of rentals, they are paying less in terms of other living expenses as compared to someone who is living in a similar or comparable suburb in Zimbabwe. So you need also to consider the cost of living if it's going to be higher in Zimbabwe or in the diaspora. Kwamuri kugara ikoko. There's a debate yanga ichingo iri social media as well yokuti maybe you are earning 500 in Zimbabwe and you are earning 1,500 1,800 in the UK. Which option is better? In Inango, I would think the 1,500 or the 1,800 in the UK is far much better than the 500 in Zimbabwe. Yes, both of you munogona kunge muchishandisa 500 mese muchisarwa musina any amount mapedza kubhadhara your living expenses, but the type of lifestyle inorarama munhu ari kuwana 1.8 might be far much better than the lifestyle yemunhu ari kuwana 500 in Zimbabwe. So you may never have some of the opportunities dzinowanikwa nemunhu ari kuwana 1.5 or 1.8 ari kudiaspora. In the diaspora there are other opportunities like access to finance. It's actually easier to get financing. Maybe you can buy your property, a mortgage that you start to pay on a monthly basis, such that when time yokuti maakufunga kudzoka kumusha, maakufunga kuretire, you can have your own property. You have access of finance yokuti you can use that finance to start some businesses back home, or you can start some businesses in the diaspora. If you're someone who is business minded, that opportunity might not be the same for someone who is earning 500 in Zimbabwe. So ndizvo zvangandida kukushare muzuva ranhasi about this idea which has been topical of relocating back to Zimbabwe. I'm sure you have learned a lot from this video. If you have learned something from this video, I'd like to hear from you. Please leave your comment, subscribe, like and share this content. And we are entering into a season of study permits for the foreigners who want to study in South Africa. Kana uri munhu ada kunostudy South Africa and you want assistance with study permit, please do not hesitate to reach out to Imicom Immigration and Business Solutions. You can go across all our platforms and reach out to our team. You can also reach to me directly per email iri kushowa below this video. Cheers.